Hi everyone and welcome to this Google Digital Garage training session, Build a CV and Write a Cover Letter. My name's Kirsty, I'm a trainer for Google's free skills training program, Google Digital Garage. I've been working in this industry now training around all different digital skills and digital marketing skills for around 7 years. And I absolutely love helping people find their space in the digital world, whether that's with a business or, like today, as an individual, starting to look for those next steps in your career. But I'm not up here alone. In the chat, you may have already seen our lovely moderator today, Glenn. So Glenn is also a Google Digital Garage coach and mentor and is going to be interacting with you, answering any questions that come up in the chat, and also starting to share any helpful links or useful things that we talk about as we move through today's session. What I would love for you to do, and I can already see a couple of you coming through and saying hi in the chat, so I'm going to encourage more of that. I'd love for you to say hello in the chat, introduce yourself, and let us know today, what is it that attracted you to today's session? Are you currently looking for a new position? Are you revamping your CV and cover letter? Where are you at? And what is it that's drawn you to today's session? While you do that, I'm going to run through a little bit of housekeeping. So first of all, if you at any point in this session have trouble hearing or seeing the webinar, please do try refreshing your browser. I will be pausing throughout to answer questions, but remember Glenn is there in the chat as well. So feel free to fire away with your questions as we work through the material, and I will come back to them in those pausing for questions sections. And then finally, just to let you know, this is not a standalone session. This is part of a whole schedule of upcoming webinars that you can book yourself onto and attend and really get the most out of this completely free training. I think that's all the housekeeping. The one last thing that I would say is if you are someone that needs captions, we do have captions running. So if you hover over the YouTube video, there should be a little symbol that says CC for closed captions, and you should be able to turn that on and make use of the captioning there as well. So that's the housekeeping done. Let's get going with building a CV and writing a cover letter. And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because actually for some, the thought of writing about themselves in a whole document is super frightening. It's really scary, and it can fill us through full of anxiety. And it's not surprising because it's something that we're unfamiliar with. We're used to talking positively about colleagues or friends, peers, but when it comes to talking about ourselves, sometimes that can feel a little bit daunting. So what we're going to do with this session is actually break it up into 3 core areas. The first part is really going to focus on building a CV. We're going to start to think about the information that your CV needs to include and some different approaches that you can actually use to display that information when it comes to the CV itself. The second part of the session is then going to focus all on your cover letter, how to use a cover letter, how to curate a cover letter that really goes into a little bit more detail around your experiences, your skills, your strengths, and the goals that you have as well. And then finally, in the third part of today's CV and cover letter session, we're going to think about how we can take that one step further and make sure that we are ready for job search. So what options are available when it comes to those market trends? And also, how do we start to identify the goals that we have within our career in order for us to move forward? Now, I also want to highlight a fantastic opportunity here as well. For those of you that are looking to get back into a new sector, or you're looking for other career certificates that can help you really start to develop what you display on your CV and cover letter, please do check out and save this link, goo.gul/careercert UK, and that Career Cert UK is case sensitive, so make sure you include those capital letters. That link will take you to our job ready career certificates. Now these Google career certificates have been curated to really help you gain the experience needed to jump straight into an entry level role within places like IT support, project management, data analytics, UX design. I think there's also a digital marketing and e-commerce course there now, and a Python as well for those of you interested in code. So have a look at these. No relevant experience or degree is required. And if you're in the UK, you can access these Google Career Certificates via the free scholarships through selected partners when you sign up. So make sure you take that note down. I'm sure that Glenn is going to share that link for you in the chat, but it's a really great opportunity for you to start to maximize on your experience and skill level. Now back to you. Now I had a few hellos there, one from Quincy, one from, who else have we got there? Shruti, hello, welcome. Anyone else that's out there, please do say hello. But also, can you answer this question? In the chat, can you tell Glenn and I, what are your career aspirations? Can you clearly identify what you would like your next steps to be? Is there a specific role that you would like to work towards? Or maybe you know the industry but not the specific role? Or maybe you have a really clear idea on things like, I know I want to work with children, or I know I want to work within a caring environment. Do you have any aspirations within your career that you're trying to work towards? And I'd love to see some of them in the chat. What's great about this is this really helps you to solidify those aspirations, because you're putting them out there, you're writing them down, and you're sharing them with others to start really holding yourself accountable to those next steps. So it's a really great thing for us to do together. So let us know in the chat, because I'd absolutely love to see some of those. Which brings us to our first part, our objective one of today's session, which is all about building a CV. Now, in this section, we're going to start to think about a templated approach that you can customize, because there's not only one way to create a CV. Depending on the industry that you want to go into, depending on the sector, depending on the role, depending on how much experience you've got, we need to be a little bit flexible in how we display all of our information within our CV. Some jobs might require you to have a short and kind of to the point CV, whereas other jobs might want you to have something a little bit longer, more detailed. And some companies, so if it's a startup, for example, they might even request that you keep your CV to one A4 piece of paper. So it's really important that you look at the criteria in those job descriptions. And if you've got that templated approach with all the key components of your CV, you can start to move that around. And I can see here we've got Khalil. Hello, right now I'm entering university, but my goal is to develop certain skills that will help me in the future. I will study business analytics. Nice, thank you so much for sharing. And then we've got Raya there. I want to work in a creative role, either in publishing or in design. Not really sure about that yet. Fantastic. I mean, even having those two ideas, either within that publishing sector or maybe going towards the design sector, you've got that first step to start thinking about how you can tailor your CV to speak directly to the roles that would sit in any of those sectors. So thank you so much for sharing. If anyone else feels comfortable to share, I'm sure Glenn would love to read some of them, and I will come back and have a look after. I'm going to try and keep this session as practical as possible to keep you thinking. With our first question, so in the chat, I would like you now to think about what the primary purpose of a CV is. Why do we write a CV? Tell me in the chat. What's the main reason for writing a CV? Is there something specific that we use it for? Is it to, I don't want to give you any answers. I'm going to see what you come up with first. So tell us in the chat. I'm just going to take a sip of water. And let me know what you think the primary purpose of a CV is. Now, the name CV, Curriculum Vitae, Really, really interesting. So CV is short for curriculum vitae, which is actually Latin for the meaning of the course of your life or the journey of your life. So it's not just about the jobs you've had. It's not just about the responsibilities that you fulfilled in a certain specific role. Your CV should reflect or is there to reflect your life experience, not just your formal qualifications or a particular role that you've held for however long, or maybe you've done some work experience. It's about so much more than that. And actually, that it's really interesting when we look at the name of this document. The course of your life is so much more than sort of what our original impression of this document is. And I can see a couple of answers there coming through. Quincy, what's the purpose of a CV? Quincy, professional introduction of yourself. Yeah. Ria, to demonstrate our suitability for a certain role. Absolutely. Is there any more coming through? I will keep reading if there are. But yeah, I mean, look, already we're getting a couple of different suggestions of why we would use that CV. And the truth is, it's for all of these reasons: to professionally introduce ourselves, to introduce some of our personality as well. So, to personally introduce ourselves, to promote yourself and your skills. Yes, Khalil. To demonstrate that suitability, and not just the suitability to the role that you're applying for, but also the suitability to the company culture that you're applying for, which allows us again to approach our CV in a way where we can edit sections to really fit the language of a certain job description. So there's loads of things that we can start to include. The thing to remember is that often your CV is potentially your first contact with your employer. Now, whether a potential employer is asking to see your CV or resume, they are the same thing, depending on where you're based. An employer is looking for one thing. It is a document that proves that you are the ideal candidate for them to invest their time and their money to pay you, because they believe you are the best all-round candidate for that job role. And that's not just about all the previous roles that you've had. It's about much more than that. So it's a summary of all of your experience. And that includes experience that you've had in an outside of work experience. Do you have something that you have committed to on a sort of skilled hobby level that has brought a certain discipline into who you are and how you handle and situations or problem solve? Can you show those potential employers, that prospective employer, that you are goal orientated and you're relevant to that company, you're relevant? And they also want to see that you are authentic and honest. Really, really important. Now, we all can embellish certain things that we've done throughout our careers, but it's really important that you remain authentic to who you are and the experiences that you've had. There's absolutely no point lying on your CV, because all it takes is to be asked a certain question in an interview based on the lie that they've read on your CV, and then it's really hard for you to create a professional answer, because you're not coming from an authentic place. So because it's that first contact with your potential employer, starting to think about going beyond just stating your work experience and starting to think about how you can make your CV stand out by including some of those additional skills, those additional experiences, whilst still maintaining that authenticity about your personality. Okay, back to you again in the chat. I told you, keeping it nice and practical to get going today. What information do you think we should include in our CV? So before we jump into that template and go through some of the sections, who knows what we should have in our CV? Tell me and Glenn in the chat. So we've started to think about 3 key elements that we need to include within these sections. We need to be authentic. We need to make sure that we're goal orientated and that we're showcasing our experience so that we're relevant. But how can we start to break that up? What types of sections do we need? Now, I'll go with a nice, easy one. We need our name, of course, and potentially at the top, we could have some other information, contact details, a LinkedIn profile. So what else could we have as we move down that page? So we've got our name, contact details. What else could we have? I can see in the chat we've got profile summary there. Nice. Khalil, nice. Education, experience, skills, and contact information. Yes, absolutely. So having that educational experience, those qualifications, as well as the work experience can be a really great addition. And then I can see, Shruti saying name too. So any more coming through, I'd love to see them and I will keep coming that back. But I'm going to reveal how we're going to work through a step-by-step process for curating this CV together. And you got it. A lot of you got it there. So starting with some of that basic information. Now, what I want to say here is there's no universal template, but it's really important that your CV includes some core elements. And I can see so many of them coming through in the chat there. Experience, education, skills, certifications, achievements. Absolutely killing it there. Love it. So imagine that you are a prospective employer. You have one vacancy and 50 CVs to read. And you only have a few minutes until your next meeting, and you're pretty back to back in your day-to-day job too. So you've got to read these 50 CVs for one vacancy throughout your normal day. As a prospective employer, where do you start? How do you figure out who to call in, who's going to have the best relevant experience, relevant personality? So your CV generally doesn't want to be longer than 2 A4 sides of paper. Now that's here in the UK. Again, I stated earlier, if you're applying to a startup or someone that's specifically stated that they want 1 A4 page, then that's worth noting as well. But we don't want it any longer really than 2 pages. And you can then tailor that to the specific role that you're applying for. Now, what we're going to do together is walk through some of these areas. And once you have each of these areas drafted out, you're going to keep the basic information at the top. But all of these other sections, depending on what's most relevant to the job you're applying for, they're interchangeable. You can move them up and down that page on your CV, depending on what you want that prospective employer to take note of first. So starting at the top with the basic information, this is where we're going to have our name, your address if it's relevant. I tend to put my location and postcode, so I could put my postcode and then the nearest city. So I live in Liverpool, so I would put Liverpool and then maybe my postcode, so they've got that specific sort of location and where I am in Liverpool. Contact information, and anything else. So things like if you have a working visa, that could go at the top so they know straight away that you have a visa with you. If you have a driving license and that's relevant to the role, so maybe you're applying for a job that you need to be able to drive, then that would be classed as an important piece of information that you can include at the top. And again, any links to things like a LinkedIn profile, or if you have an online portfolio anywhere that you want to showcase. So just coming back to whoever said they wanted to potentially go into design, that was Ria. You might have a portfolio somewhere that you can link into that basic information at the top. The next part, and you did talk about this when I asked for the answers, that opening summary or that personal summary, that's all about you. And it's really important that this is as close to the top as possible, underneath those key details. And it's no more than 2 to 3 sentences. And these 2 to 3 sentences are acting as your elevator pitch. They're describing who you are to that employer so they can get an idea of who you are and the experience that you've got. Now, this elevator pitch, this personal summary, is a really, really great opportunity for you to succinctly tell an employer who you are, what you can do, and the type of role that you're looking to excel in. If you lack experience, and I have this quite a few times when I've been helping people with their CVs. If you lack a particular part of experience in this summary, you want to highlight the skills and education that you do have. So if you have unpaid work experience or volunteer roles, or you have overall goals, career ambitions, focus on those positive elements. In terms of having the experience, we see it all. We see it a lot, don't we? It's a entry level assistant role in digital marketing, but they want you to have 3 years experience. Don't let that put you off, because experience, like I said earlier, is much more than on the job paid experience. You might have helped a family member out with their social media marketing, or you might have designed a website in your spare time. Not paid work, but it's still real life experience. So, how can you refer to that in this elevator pitch for yourself? Now, the next section to include in your CV is your work experience. When you're completing this section, it's really important that you complete these points, these experience sections in reverse chronological order. Super, super important. So the most recent role that you've done will be at the top. And as the prospective employer reads down the CV, he or she, they will go back in time. So reverse chronological order. Then make sure each work experience that you're listing, you can use bullet points to really highlight each part, but make sure that you have the company, the job title, and the dates, even if it's from month and year to a month and year. It doesn't have to be the exact dates. Then within that, you can list some of the work you've done, some of the key projects or the results. Really important to include things, not just the responsibilities that you had in that role, but also what you achieved, even if those achievements were group achievements. I was part of a team that managed to expand our customer base by 25% in 6 months. We did that through. Can you bring some of those statistics to the table from some of the work that you've done? Now, as well as work experience, some of your experience may be volunteer experience. And there was someone earlier that said they're about to start university. So your work experience might be limited, but you might have had loads of opportunities to work and volunteer with different companies in order to gain other types of experience. Now, depending on what your situation is here, because everyone's going to be in a different situation. Some people will include their volunteer work if it's relevant within that overall experience section. If you feel like you've got enough of both, you can separate them. You can have work experience with your paid work experience and volunteer experience, and then list some of those volunteering spaces that you've worked in. Quite similarly to the work experience and volunteer experience places, you need a section in your CV that then goes through your education and achievements. Now, again, depending on your situation and what you've done within your career so far, some people will have one section titled education or education and achievements, education and qualifications, and they will then have one singular list of up until now any schools, colleges, universities that they've acquired any accreditations. If you have potentially worked in a different sector, you've got a few more years experience and you're looking to change careers, you might mix this up a bit. You might have your education where you include your formal education, so anything to do with school, colleges, universities, but you might also have collected other certifications in terms of professional certificates or accreditations over your working life. So you could have a separate section that is your professional development, professional certifications. Now, with each of these types of lists and sections in your CV, again, we want to make sure that they are in reverse chronological order. So the most recent certification that you've taken is at the top, and then you go back in time. Include any academic qualifications, professional qualifications, and if something like your degree, for example, you've taken part in a key project or a piece of research that was really, really relevant to your experience and the skills that you obtained in order to do the job right, talk about it. Create a singular bullet point that sums up that project and why it was useful to your development. Then we can have a skills and strengths section. Now, CV and cover letters are not about tricking your employer into hiring you. And I touched on this a moment ago when I talked about being authentic and honest. They're about highlighting all of the parts of you as a person, your character, your experience that are most applicable for the job you're applying for. So in order to represent yourself efficiently, it's really, really worth that you start to think about what your employable qualities are. And I can guarantee that you have many. And I have this conversation with many people, and they'll say, "Yeah, but I'm not really good at anything. Or I'm not really the." And when we actually then get into a conversation, they have some incredible skills that are relevant to telling someone that they're applying for a job with. So think about what skills you have and what experience suits the job that you're applying for. Get to know yourself. That is the starting point, a key starting point when you're getting ready for a job search. It's going to help you really start to understand those natural strengths that you have and those characteristics that you can bring to the table when it comes to looking for a new role. So ask yourself questions like, what qualities would people describe you as having? Do you have soft or technical skills? And if you do, what are they? And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And how do these then relate directly to the job description that you're applying for? Now, when it comes to skills, you can separate your skills into three core areas. You've got soft skills, and your soft skills are including anything to do with leadership, teamwork, communication, timekeeping, anything that is an interpersonal trait, an interpersonal skill. And soft skills are huge. That employers are really looking for how you can demonstrate resilience, communication skills, assertiveness, presentation skills, the ability to manage your workload. And you can start to display and develop your soft skills in all sorts of experience. So there's so many ways that you can start to display those skills that you have, and they're really important to any working environment. But then you have your hard skills. Now, your hard skills could be things like speaking another language, accounting. Maybe you have a specific software experience. Maybe you're really great with Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace. There's so many different types of hard skills, but these are skills that you've gone out, you've practiced, and you've learned how to do something. And then the final kind of set of skills that you might want to showcase might be your digital skills. Now, the UK government has laid out what it calls the Essential Digital Skills Framework. And it's really important that you understand where you are when it comes to your digital skills. Maybe you have some more advanced digital skills, such as coding, video editing, experience with social media. But sometimes a job role might require you to be really great with PowerPoint or Google Slides, PowerPoint development, presentation development, or maybe being able to use a word processing piece of software. So starting to think about the digital skills that are relevant to the job, if any, that you're applying for, and how you can categorize them across your CV and showcase what you're good at. Now, if you're thinking, oh, I'm a bit stuck with some of those words to use, take a picture of this screen. It might give you a little bit of inspiration when it comes to, oh, how can I start to sample and give examples of different skills within my CV. So we've got a mix here of hard skills, technical skills, and soft skills. So teamwork, project management, video editing, leadership, complex logistics, networking. So start to think about what would be relevant to the jobs you're applying for. And then what we can start to do, now we know the importance of starting to showcase our skills on our CV, we can start to identify and draw our attention to defining what our strengths are. When we're applying for jobs, it's really important that we stand out from the crowd and we start to set ourselves above all the other candidates that are applying for that role. And a great way of doing that is to also reflect upon the strengths that you have and really start to showcase that throughout your CV and cover letter to your potential employer. So ask yourselves questions like, what are you good at? What do you like doing? What makes you stand out from any other potential applicant? Now, your strengths are not always things that you haven't worked on. You might have a natural strength, but you might also have strengths that you've really developed and it's taken discipline to create that as a strength. Start to think about what some of your strengths are, what you're good at, and how that is relevant to the role that you're applying for. So again, thinking about, are you enthusiastic? Do you enjoy helping people? You're adaptable, hardworking, dependable, caring. And then starting to think about what some of these things lead into when it comes to that specific role you're applying for. And it's really important that you start to think about the relevant keywords based on that position that you are targeting. Now, when it comes to your physical experience, the question we often get in some of these sessions is, how can I showcase my experience? How can I let people know exactly what I've done and why it's relevant? And sometimes we get people say, well, I don't have enough experience. If you feel like you don't have enough experience to apply for a specific role, don't panic. Because actually, what is experience? And a lot of people think that experience is only having physical work experience. But ultimately, your experience covers absolutely anything that showcases to a potential employer that you have a specific set of skills or a specific strength that would allow you to fulfill the job role in that job description. And there's a few different ways that you can gain that experience: internships, work experience, part-time jobs or weekend jobs, volunteering, certificates and achievements. Maybe you've got a specific hobby or extracurricular activity that has really allowed you to develop a particular skill or strength. So it's really interesting when we look at what we think is experience, because an employer is not just looking at what you've done. An employer is also looking for what you can do. And your job is to convince them that you're capable of taking on that job within that job description. So start by making a list of all your relevant experience. If you are a fresh graduate or you're yet to graduate, have you worked throughout your degree? Have you taken part in an internship during your studies? Have you experienced working for a friend or a relative in the past? As long as you can talk about that experience, that is a real experience. It doesn't matter if it was a non-paid 2-week work experience. It's still a real experience. So what did you learn? What did you take away as a skill or a strength? As long as you can talk about that authentically and honestly, it's still an experience. And it's still something that you did in order to acquire relevant work experience, relevant skills, relevant time within a specific skill. Really important, just as a final note, is just to be honest about what your experience is. Talk about your experience sensibly. Remember, the employer is not expecting you to have all wisdom and all expertise. Actually, the opposite. An employer doesn't want someone necessarily that can tick every single point on that job description list, because it's also a two-way street. They want to be able to add value to you as an employee and not have someone that's bored because they can already do everything. So if you haven't got all of those expertise points, it's about showcasing how you would get there too, and that you have that tenacity to get there. So reflect on what your experience is to date. Think about, okay, I've made a list of all my experience. Now look at each of those points. What did you do? What did you achieve in that role, that volunteer role, that studying role? And how is that one singular experience relevant to the roles that you want to apply for when it comes to work? And work through your experience list in that way, making sure you've checked off each of these 3 areas for each experience that you've listed. Now, when it comes to the formatting, I mentioned earlier that as long as those core sections are part of your CV, you can move around depending on what's most relevant to the job that you're applying for. So start to think about what content you want to draw attention to. If your key skills are more important at this point than your work experience, then put the key skills at the top. And vice versa, maybe your education is more relevant at this point in your career than your physical work experience. So put your key skills and your education towards the top. So they're the first thing that you're drawing that attention to. And in terms of general formatting, try and keep your CV like the one on the left. Clean, professional, easy to read. So we've got some clear titles, a clear background on that lighter background and that clean text. No fonts that are hard to read and hard to understand. Remember, the CV should be quick and easy to read and nice and easy to just kind of scan through and know exactly what we're going to find in each of those sections. So to summarize this first part, which is all about that CV template, maximize your impact. Write in clear and concise manner. Keep those bullet points short and sweet. Remember, we want to make sure that we're avoiding jargon, we're using simple language, but we're still summarizing our experience. Be transparent. If you do have any gaps in your CV, maybe you took some time out to travel, maybe you were looking after a family member, maybe you had children and raised your own family, and you have a gap in your work experience, be honest about it. Put it in there. Say, from this date to this date, I took time out. Was there anything that you did during that gap? So, for example, actually, in my CV, I have a gap of just under 2 years. And it's not so relevant now because it was nearly 10 years ago. But when I was first back in the UK and I was applying for work, it was super relevant because I had a 2-year gap in my CV. I'd gone traveling. I booked a one-way ticket to Europe and I was meant to come back in 3 months and I came back a year and a half later. But I learned so much. I did so many things. So I created a section in my work experience, in my experience section, and I put traveling around Europe, interrailing from this date and year, this month and year to this month and year. And I did no more than 2 to 3 bullet points where I gave them indications of skills that I picked up, interpersonal skills, ability to problem solve when things went wrong, the amount of countries I managed to kind of stick on a budget, which were all relevant to the types of roles that I was wanting to go for within marketing. I was showcasing where I could think on my feet and how that traveling experience make me better at the role that I'm doing. So think about the gaps in your CV and how can you talk about that experience in that gap and how it's built resilience. Maybe you had a family and raised a family, and towards the end of maternity or that time off where you were redeciding what to do, you took a qualification. Start to understand and talk about what you've learned in those gaps. And get a second or third opinion. Start to think about, okay, who can I give this to that's going to give me honest advice? That's going to not just be my mum that's going to read it and not really understand what I'm trying to achieve. Give it to someone maybe that is looking to go into the same sector as you. Maybe you've got a lecturer that can read your CV for you, and go and get a little bit of a second opinion on things like the tone of your CV, the spelling, the grammar, make sure it's accurate. And if you've got terminology or phrases that are industry specific, think about, can someone who's not an expert understand exactly what you're trying to put across with your skills? Now, I like to spend a lot of time in that section because it's really, really important to really understand how we can focus some of these sections in our CV to speak directly to those potential employers. Now, I can see, can you please explain how to alter the resume if I'm planning to apply for a role I have no experience in? Like, I'm a pharmacist and I'm applying for a data analyst role. Hi, Mohammed. Thank you so much for your question. Now, this is really common. A change in career is super, super common. You're not alone here, and congrats for giving it a go. My first bit of advice would be go back to what we've just talked about in terms of skills, strengths. Have you got the soft skills, the hard skills, the digital skills? Look at the job description. Now, the beauty of a job description is that every business, every employer has a problem, and they have given you a full description of what that problem is, and their solution is you. So work through those job descriptions and start, print them out if you need to and scribble on them. Why are you a solution to each of those problems that they're stating in that job description? And actually, if you are in a career change, you're at an advantage of having real working experience. And for example, in a pharmacist to a data analyst, there are going to be transferable skills that you will take through. As a pharmacist, you talk to people every day. As a data analysis, a lot of data is analyzing the impact of behavior. So some of your insight from working with people is going to then allow you to take some of that sort of solution focused trait into that next role with you. So start to think about some of the skills that you've used every day in a particular role and how they could transfer to that job description that you're looking at applying for next. Additionally, I would also make sure that you're actively working towards maybe the data analysis career set, the Google career set we mentioned. So you're starting to work towards some of those relevant certifications when it comes to those roles. Okay, can't see any more questions. So moving into part 2, thinking about a cover letter. Now, it's really interesting because a lot of people don't spend a lot of time on a cover letter. It can be time consuming, but it's definitely worth it because your CV is so succinct and short and sweet that your cover letter offers that extra bit of personality and that extra bit of connection to who you are and why you would be great for that specific role. It gives you a chance to start to showcase your skills and your experience. 40% of recruiters say that they look for a cover letter on applications, and 45% of those say that a lack of a cover letter actually results in a rejected CV. So your cover letter is your chance to really start to sell yourself. Now, just like our CV, we can approach this in sections rather than get a blank page and think, I don't know where to start and I've got to write about myself. What we can do is actually approach this in blocks, just like your CV. And we've all been there. We've been asked to write something about ourselves and we have no idea where to start. So we can start at the top with the hello, hi, and the dear. Start to think about How you're going to address the person that you're writing to. If you've already met them, you know who they are, you might use something like hi. It's a little bit more informal. Hello is friendly but not too old-fashioned, so that might be your more traditional approach. But again, if you want something a little bit more formal and classic, you could go with dear. Really start to think about who you're addressing. Do you have the name of the person that is recruiting? If so, great. Is there a way that you can find who that hiring manager is and or the person in that specific role is? If you're not sure who to address it to, you could potentially leave that line blank, or you could say something like, for the attention of the hiring manager. If you can get their name though, that would be fantastic. And when it comes to that second part, the introduction, this is where you can start to introduce yourself. Who are you? Which skills and expertise do you have? Why are you a good candidate for this role? So you're starting to think about, okay, what job am I specifically applying for? I'm applying for this job, and I heard about this job here. The other great thing is if you've been recommended by someone that's already an existing employee, you can put this within that first line and they're going to instantly know you've been suggested to apply for this role in that first introduction. So that second part, after you've said hello or hi to the person that you're talking to, who are you? What are you interested in? What job are you specifically applying for, and how did you hear about it? Keep it nice and simple. The next part is starting to think about your summary. Again, so this is extending that elevator pitch from your CV. What's important to you? What are you good at and what do you enjoy? And remember to always link that back into why the answers to those questions are relevant to the job you're applying for. My favourite part of the cover letter is this next paragraph, the problem versus solution. I said to you, every business has a problem and they state that full problem in that job description. And this is your opportunity to showcase that you have read that job description, you've done your research on the business, you understand the industry, and you can start to match the language that they've used in that job description. You can start to pick out elements of that job description on why you are the right fit for that specific role. And it's a really nice way for you to align yourself with some of those company goals. The next section, which is an optional paragraph, but sometimes super relevant if you feel like you've got so much more to talk about and you haven't managed to fit that all in your CV. Are there anything else that's relevant? Volunteering, certificates, achievements, languages. Maybe you've got a specific hobby or interest. There wasn't quite a space for it in your CV, but you feel that the skills that you've gained are relevant. So you can add that into this optional paragraph. That again can sometimes give you a little bit of an edge compared to those competitors. And the final block, signing off. Making sure that you sign off with a really clear, strong thank you and sign off. So there's an example here. I'll read it out for you. I'm really honoured to be considered for this position. I look forward to hearing from you, and please let me know if you'd like any more information about me. Many thanks, and then your name. Another one of my favourite sign-offs is to say thank you for taking the time to read my CV and cover letter. So it's really about speaking with that positive language. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. You're going to get in contact with me because I am best candidate. And really running with that positive energy. Now remember to tailor every application, every CV and cover letter that you send to the role that you are sending it for. Is it more relevant that you have a portfolio? If you are looking for self-employed work or you're a creative, you might like or need to have a portfolio to showcase samples of your work, present the abilities that you have, and be able to show the scope of what you can do. Make sure that you are talking actively about those skills that we talked about earlier in today's sessions. And if there's some things that you've written down in your notes and you've not quite covered in your CV, how can you bring them through to the cover letter to highlight some of those skills and showcase further experience or ability? And again, if you're applying for full-time work, internships, graduate opportunities, make sure you've highlighted those relevant qualifications that are requirements within that job description. So again, when you come to that problem versus solution part. Now, to run through this super quick, and really look at what a CV might look like if we put together these sections. Dear Mrs. Webb, I'm a customer assistant currently employed at Smarks, and I would like to apply for the sales advisor role at Shirts and Skirts. I heard about the job through seeing the position advertised on jobmarket.com. So we've got our hi, hello, dear section and our introduction. Summarization. I would describe myself as friendly, helpful, and a patient team member. And I take pride in offering a great level of customer service. I've been praised for the warm manner in which I deal with customers. Problem versus solution. I think I'd be a great fit for the role because I pride myself in being able to cope well under stress, and I have also worked part-time at Marquis while studying. I'm used to dealing with a range of customers on a daily basis. So again, picking out some of those sentences from the job description and really starting to embed that language into these paragraphs. And the final part, relevant achievements. In my spare time, I enjoy volunteering at the local youth group in my village, where I help to organise activities for the group. I'm also taking a short part-time course on counselling, as I love learning about the human mind and improving my listening skills. And the final sparkle paragraph, the sign off. I'm really honoured to be considered for this position. I look forward to hearing from you, and please let me know if you would like any more information about me. Many thanks, and then your name. Which brings us to our second pausing for questions. I don't see any questions coming through. I can see that Glenn is typing in the chat there. But if you do have any final questions, please do pop them into the chat and we'll come back to them towards the end. We've got one more pausing for questions section there. So bringing us into our final 7 minutes left together, really starting to think about how you make sure you're ready for your job search. Now, we first need to understand what opportunities are out there and how we can match the opportunities that we want have potential to apply for with things like your values and your career goals. And I asked you about your career aspirations at the beginning of this session. So starting to understand those next steps can start to help you when it comes to applying for jobs. First thing to think about when you start putting yourself out there, have you checked your digital footprint? When applying for jobs, it's really important that you pay close attention to your online profile and presence. Your digital footprint is all of the information that can be found out about a person online, and that includes their activity, their posts on social media, things that they've been tagged in, any activity online. So content that you share, photos, videos, posts, anything like that, pages that you follow, businesses that you engage with, maybe posts that you've been tagged in by others. So your digital footprint is part of your online presence, and it's really important because if it's left unchecked, it can be seen by anyone, including these potential employers that you're applying for work with. To kind of really hammer this home, why is this important? Well, 90% of recruiters are going to check your social media presence to learn more about you. And actually, after employee referrals and company websites, social media is the third most important recruiting tool. So have you checked your socials and made sure that they represent you in the best possible light for applying for work? And a third of employers use social media to find recruits. And some of these statistics are really sobering because there's a lot of us that have really old photos or potential tags in photos that really just wouldn't showcase us in the as the best possible employee when we're first starting to tidy up this digital presence. And that's really all about starting to think about creating an authentic, compelling personal brand. Now, we have a fantastic session. I mentioned earlier that this is not a standalone session. We have a great session that's all about building your professional brand online. And if this is something that interests you a little bit more, then I'd suggest that you book onto that session and really get going with this. Reevaluate your social media, create a LinkedIn profile, get involved when it comes to discussions and networking online, and any content that you're sharing. Have you got a professional platform that you can share engaging and relevant content to the industry that you want to get into? Super, super important. And when it comes to what you want to do, there's a world of possibility out there, whether it's apprenticeships, internships, graduate schemes, part-time work, full-time work. There's so many different opportunities for you to explore. Hybrid, there's so many things that you can start to think about. So think big, dare to dream, be bold with those goals and those plans that you have. Start to identify trends. Start thinking about the sectors that interest you that potentially are trending, and there's not many people working in those industries as of yet. And make sure you do your research. Research those roles, research the specific requirements. What are employers looking for? What tasks happen on a day-to-day basis within specific roles, within specific sectors? And can you start to talk about the relevant skills, the relevant knowledge, or relevant experience that you have that you can help you fulfill that role? If you find a job that you really love the sound of, but you don't feel that you meet the full list of requirements, then you could use that as a list of things that you want to develop and hone in when it comes to your skills. Take courses, attend events, attend talks, start gaining experience in the places that you feel you're lacking. And when it comes to tools, which tools can you use to start looking for specific roles? There's loads of options. You've got search engines, you've got tools on Google, Bing, Yahoo to start finding those latest roles and listings. You've got jobs boards, so many of these: Indeed, Reed, Total Jobs, so many different types of job boards where you can start having a look. And of course, you've got professional networks, places like LinkedIn, thinking about places where you can create conversations and relationships with hiring managers and decision makers. In terms of on search, just as a visual, a lot of these jobs boards work in a similar way. You can start to search via category, job title, the date the job was posted, sector, company type, and the job title itself. You can even use the location and that near me phrase that we use in a search engine. Keep an eye out for that key information. What are those daily tasks and responsibilities? Is there a specific skill or experience required for that role that you want to apply for? Does the company have a commitment to your personal development, your training, your progression? And of course, what's the salary? How much does that role pay? And where is it based? Because that salary, is that a wage that you can live on comfortably? Does it cover your expenses? And when it comes to location, if you need to commute each day, how is that going to affect you? It's worth noting that all of this key information may not appear straight away. You might have to check the job advert for salary expectations. You can go on sites like Glassdoor, and I'm sure Glenn can grab the Glassdoor website for you, where you can look at reviews or information about the company that you're applying for. But make sure you do that research. Now, to finish off, choose certain roles that really match your values. What are your values? What's most important to you? And how can you make sure you find a job that fits what you want to do? And a way to do this is to create that SMART goal framework. Specific. I want to work as a finance manager at a startup. Make it measurable. I will have achieved this when I receive a job offer. Make it achievable. I'm currently working as a finance intern. I'm realistic. I have the knowledge and the skills required. And then give it a time-bound deadline. I want to have achieved this goal in the next 2 years' time. Now, we've got to the end of our time together, but very quickly in the chat, I would love for you to tell us, while I wrap up, what are your career goals for the next year? Has this session inspired you to take some next steps when it comes to your career goals? Is there something after this session that you think, I'm going to go and work on this, and that's what I need to do? I can't see any other questions, but lots to take away from today's session. So I'd love to see some of those things coming through the chat to wrap up. But while you do that, remember, there are those Google Career Certificates, goo.gov/Career Cert UK. There's 6 different courses that you can take there that are going to help you stand out to future employers. And again, to finish up, we would absolutely love to hear any of your feedback. We've got goo.gov/Google Digital Garage feedback. If you're talking about us online, use our hashtag Digital Garage. And other than that, thank you so much for your engagement, your questions, your answering my questions, because I'm going to wrap up now. But I do hope this has been a useful dive into building a CV and writing a cover letter. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you very much.